The wind never stopped screaming across the ruins of Ephora 9. Once it had been a colony, a shimmering outpost of humanity's hope. Now it was a skeleton of dust and rusted steel. Joshua Kane had lived here alone for 7 years. His days blurred into the same rhythm, scavenging through collapsed domes for spare solar cells, repairing broken air seals, and talking to ghosts that didn't answer. The world had died when the atmosphere reactors failed, leaving only a few surviving structures and one stubborn engineer who refused to leave. The silence of extinction had become his companion, and in its endless echo he found a strange kind of peace. The dead didn't argue, and machines never lied. He'd learned to live like a ghost himself. His shelter was an old maintenance bay sealed from the red wasteland outside, walls lined with scavenged panels and flickering lamps. The roof creaked when storms passed. He kept an old wrench hanging beside his cot, the last tool from his crew, a symbol of defiance against entropy. Every night he'd sit by the porthole, staring at the horizon where the sun dipped behind shattered towers, painting the dust blood orange. It was beautiful in a cruel way, like watching the universe forget you. He sometimes thought of Earth, though its image felt fictional now. People, laughter, touch, they were memories of another species. He was the last man on a dead planet, and he had learned not to expect miracles. That was why the knock nearly stopped his heart. It came sharp and clear against the metal door, cutting through the storm's howl. For a moment he thought he was hallucinating, another trick of loneliness, until it came again, louder. He grabbed his oxygen rifle instinctively, moving toward the sound. "Who's there?" he shouted. The only answer was another knock. He hesitated, then unlocked the hatch, the rusted mechanism groaning in protest. The desert wind rushed in, carrying with it shapes that didn't belong to this world. 3 figures stood framed by the red light, towering, armored, their skin a deep azure that shimmered under the dying sun. Each carried a weapon, spears forged of energy and bone. And in the arms of the one in front, something wrapped in cloth. She met his gaze, her golden eyes steady. "Joshua Kane of Earth," she said. "We've come to return what's yours." His rifle lowered a fraction. "What the hell are you talking about?" he said. The woman stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Meet your children," she said simply, holding out the bundle. He blinked, unable to speak. Behind her, the other 2 stood like silent sentinels, their presence heavy with ritual. "I think you've got the wrong guy," he managed. "I haven't exactly been social." "You were part of the Ephora program," she said. "You seeded the genetic colonies before the fall." He stared at her blankly. "Those projects were prototypes. Bioengineered hybrids. They all died." "Not all," she said. Her voice softened. "Some of us lived. And we found you." The wind howled through the door, scattering dust between them like smoke. He motioned for them to come inside, unsure whether it was fear or curiosity guiding him. The Huntresses ducked under the doorway, their movements graceful but wary. They were built like athletes, their skin patterned with faint metallic markings that pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeat. The leader unwrapped the cloth bundle. Inside were 2 infants, one with pale blue skin and another with faintly human features, both breathing softly, impossibly alive. "This isn't possible," Joshua whispered. "The atmospheric collapse killed everything." "Not beneath the ice," she said. "Our mothers kept us hidden. They called us the etheric line." She looked at him as if studying a myth. "Your DNA lives in us." His knees felt weak. "You're saying I'm—" "Our father," she finished. The word hung between them like a weapon he didn't know how to use. He took a slow step back, running a hand through his dust-streaked hair. "That's insane. I was just an engineer. I didn't create life, I fixed machines." "You built the first gene wombs," she said. "You designed them to adapt to the planet's toxins. We survived because of your error." "Error?" he asked numbly. "You used your own sequence," she said. "Human stubbornness encoded in alien skin." The other Huntresses exchanged glances, as though witnessing prophecy unfold. "When our elders died, the stars named you Maker Father. We followed their stories here." He sank into his chair, staring at the floor. "If you're telling the truth," he murmured, "then humanity didn't end. It changed." The leader crouched beside him, her golden eyes level with his. Our kind hunts, fights, and survives, but we remember the human part, the part that builds instead of destroys. That's what we came to find. She placed the infants gently in his arms. Their warmth startled him. He'd almost forgotten what life felt like against his skin. Why now? He asked. Why find me? Because the planet dies again, she said. The storms grow hotter. We need your knowledge to fix what you once broke. He looked toward the horizon where the air shimmered in waves of heat. The reactors, he said quietly. They're failing again. Then you'll help us, she said. It wasn't a question. He wanted to say no, to push back, to tell them he wasn't a savior. But holding those two fragile lives, something shifted inside him. The loneliness that had calcified over years cracked, and through it came a feeling he barely recognized, purpose. All right, he said finally. But I need tools. Power cores, schematics, we've scavenged what remains, she said. Our tribe guards the old stations in the north. You'll come with us. The north, he repeated. That's a death zone. So was this place, she said. And yet you lived. She extended a hand, scarred and strong. Come, make a father. The hunt begins again. He stared at her hand for a long moment before taking it. The touch felt alien, warmer, stronger, but steady. As they stepped outside, the red sky burned brighter, the dust storm easing into a pale haze. 3 towering huntresses and 1 weary human walked together toward the wasteland, the bundles of life swaddled between them. The wind carried no words, but something in the silence had changed. For the first time in years, Joshua didn't feel alone. He looked back once at his ruined shelter, at the empty doorframe where the knock had come, then forward into the storm. The desert stretched endlessly, but now it wasn't empty, it was waiting. The desert north of Ephra 9 stretched like a sea of rust under a dying sun. Joshua trudged beside the huntresses, his boots sinking into sand that once was soil. Each step stirred faint whispers of static as dust clung to the charged plates of their armor. The leader, the one who'd handed him the children, moved with the rhythm of someone born to the wasteland. Her name was Karesh. She carried herself like a commander, though her people had long abandoned rank. The other 2, twins named Vera and Sol, followed silently, scanning the horizon with their yellow eyes. Between them hung the hum of ancient machines buried beneath the dunes. The air shimmered with heat so dense it looked alive. Joshua felt it clawing at his lungs through the filters of his mask. He hadn't spoken in hours. Neither had they. By dusk they reached the skeleton of an old weather dome. Its frame leaned like broken ribs against the sky. Karesh gestured for them to stop. We camp here, she said. Her voice carried authority that left no room for argument. Joshua dropped his pack with relief and stared at the cracked remnants of the structure. Once, it had been a climate station that monitored the planet's oxygen conversion cycles. Now, it was a hollow monument to the arrogance of survival. You really think we'll find working reactors? He asked. They're buried beneath the storms, Karesh said. But the core schematics survived in the vaults. You will make them live again. He gave a tired laugh. You're asking me to resurrect gods. You built them, she said. You'll remind them why they breathe. As the huntresses set up camp, he watched them with quiet fascination. They moved like a single organism, efficient, wordless, almost graceful. Their armor wasn't metal but a bio-weave that shifted color with temperature, glinting bronze under the red sky. When Karesh removed her helmet, Joshua caught his breath. Her hair was dark and braided close to her scalp, her face lined with faint markings that glowed faintly like molten gold. What are you staring at? She asked without looking up. You, he said before he could stop himself. You're remarkable. She smirked slightly. We were built that way. I meant alive, he said. On this planet, that's rarer than beauty. For the first time, her expression softened. Then perhaps that's what we inherited from you. Later, when the twin moons rose, Joshua sat by the campfire with the 2 infants sleeping beside him. Their small chests rose and fell in rhythm with the wind. He'd spent years talking to himself, but now every silence felt shared. Vera approached quietly, holding a metal flask. You haven't eaten, she said, handing it over. What is it? Fermented grain. It burns. Good, he said, taking a swig. The taste was sharp, alien, but it made him laugh for the first time in years. Your kind drinks pain, he said, coughing. Pain keeps the blood awake, she replied. Sleep too long, you die. He looked at her curiously. Is that how your people survived? No, she said. We survived because our mothers lied. They told us the sky would heal one day. We waited until it did. She glanced at the infants. Now you'll make sure it stays that way. He lay awake long after the others slept, staring at the stars. The cold crept through his suit, and the sound of the wind blended with memory. He remembered the collapse, the frantic last transmissions, the screams over comms as systems failed. He'd been one of 50 engineers tasked with stabilizing the reactors. He'd watched every one of them die trying. The guilt had become his only companion. But now, looking at the sleeping Huntresses and the children beside him, something in him shifted. Maybe the universe wasn't punishing him, maybe it had been waiting. The thought terrified him more than death. Because if life had found its way back here, then so had responsibility. He closed his eyes, whispering to the wind, "All right, old man. Time to make it right." By morning, they were moving again. The temperature had dropped, the sky thick with swirling dust. They reached a canyon where massive metal structures jutted from the cliffs, the remains of the northern vaults. Karesh stopped and looked at him. "Your machines sleep here," she said. "Can you wake them?" Joshua stared at the twisted towers half buried in rock. "I'll try," he said. They descended through the rubble into the darkness below. The air grew colder with each step until their breath came in clouds. When his light struck the walls, he froze. Thousands of hibernation pods lined the chamber, long since dead. In the center stood a monolith covered in vines of circuitry. "Reactor Core 7A, he murmured. "I can't believe it's still here." Karesh's voice was almost reverent. "Then begin." He brushed away dust and connected his scanner. The readings flickered weakly. "It's unstable," he said. "But if I can reroute the ignition lines, tell me what you need," Karesh interrupted. "Copper filament, 2 plasma cells, and a prayer," he said. "We have 2 of those." She signaled Vera and Sol, who moved like shadows through the wreckage, gathering pieces from broken drones. For hours they worked together, human ingenuity and alien precision. Sweat mixed with sand until Joshua's hand shook, but he refused to stop. When the final circuit sealed, he looked at her. "Ready?" "Do it," she said. He flipped the main breaker. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a deep, resonant hum rolled through the chamber, shaking the walls. Blue light surged along the conduits like veins coming alive. The Huntresses stared in silent awe. "It's breathing again," Vera whispered. The light from the core spread across the canyon, igniting dormant panels buried in the cliffs. The planet's air shivered. Joshua's monitor showed the first signs of atmospheric stabilization. He exhaled, trembling. "It's working," he said. Karesh placed a hand on his shoulder. Then hope wasn't a myth. He smiled faintly. "It never is. Just expensive." But before the relief could settle, an alarm echoed from his wrist scanner. "Radiation spike," he said. "Something's wrong." The hum deepened into a roar as one of the reactor pylons overloaded. "It's feeding on itself," he shouted. Karesh moved instantly. "Can you stop it?" "Not from here." "Then we move." She grabbed the infants, motioning to her sisters. The group sprinted through the tunnels as the ground shook beneath them. They burst out of the canyon just as a column of blue flame erupted skyward. The blast sent Joshua sprawling into the sand. When the dust cleared, the vault was gone, replaced by a crater glowing with molten glass. He coughed, his lungs burning. "It was supposed to stabilize," he gasped. Karesh looked down at him, face unreadable. "You failed." "No," he said, scanning the horizon. The radiation levels dropped rapidly instead of rising. The explosion hadn't destroyed, it had purified. The air shimmered with ozone, and for the first time in centuries, a cool wind swept across the dunes. "It worked," he whispered in disbelief. "You did it," she said. He shook his head. "No. We did." The Huntresses exchanged glances. Something unspoken passed between them, a rare emotion that looked almost like pride. They set up a temporary shelter near the ridge, the children sleeping beside the cooling glow of the reactor's remains. Joshua sat watching the horizon as dawn approached. Karesh joined him, her voice low. "Your kind was not meant to die here," she said. "Maybe yours wasn't either," he replied. "Maybe we were meant to meet halfway." She studied him for a long time. "You speak like a prophet." "No," he said. "Just an engineer with a guilty conscience." She smiled faintly. "Then guilt builds better worlds than greed." He glanced at her hand resting near his on the sand, and for a moment, the air between them felt warmer than the sun. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," she said, "we rebuild." He nodded, feeling something rare, the quiet certainty that survival wasn't enough anymore. Life needed meaning, and perhaps this broken planet had just remembered its own. The following weeks reshaped the rhythm of Joshua's existence. For the first time since the collapse, his days had structure beyond survival. The Huntresses rebuilt with purpose, moving through the wreckage of the old civilization as though awakening a slumbering god. Under Joshua's guidance, they assembled filters, rewired drones, and reignited solar fields buried beneath centuries of dust. Every spark of light that returned to the wasteland was a small victory against extinction. The air, once toxic and thin, began to soften. Plants long dormant under the soil pushed faint green shoots through the sand. Sometimes Joshua would stand alone at dawn, staring at those fragile signs of life and whisper, "You stubborn thing. You remembered." And each time, the wind seemed to answer with a sigh that almost sounded like laughter. Karesh led with quiet strength, never boasting and never faltering. Her people revered her not because she commanded them, but because she bled beside them. Joshua admired that about her. She carried power without pride, authority without distance. He caught himself watching her more often than he should, the way sunlight caught the metallic veins under her skin, the calm precision of her movements. It unsettled him, that admiration. The world had given him ghosts, not companions. Now, in her presence, he felt alive in a way that frightened him. One night, while the others slept, she found him awake by the fire, sketching reactor diagrams in the sand. "You dream in blueprints," she said softly. "Old habits," he murmured. "Machines are easier to fix than people." "Then you haven't met many of my kind," she said, and sat beside him. The flames cast her in warm light, softening the edges of her armor. "When I was a child," she said, "our elders told stories of the sky breaking, of a man who made the ground breathe again. We thought it a myth." Joshua smiled faintly. "I was just trying to keep the lights on." "Then myths are born of small intentions," she said. "You gave us a reason to believe." He shook his head. "I didn't give you belief. You already had it. I just reminded you what it looked like." She looked at him for a long time, her golden eyes reflecting the firelight. "We are not supposed to feel what I feel when you speak," she said quietly. "Our order forbids attachment." "That sounds familiar," he said. "Humans tried the same thing. Never works." Her laugh was quiet, unguarded. "Perhaps our makers shared more than blood." For a moment, silence stretched comfortably between them, broken only by the crackle of fire and the distant hum of the restored power grid. By the third month, the small group had become something like a tribe. Refugees from the northern wastes followed the light back to the vault's ruins, drawn by rumors of breathable air and food. Joshua taught them what little he knew, how to repair purifiers, how to recycle metal into farming tools. The Huntresses trained the newcomers to defend themselves, their old weapons now symbols of guardianship rather than conquest. When he saw Karesh teaching a group of children to track footprints in the sand, her laughter bright and free, he realized the planet no longer felt dead. It felt young again. One evening, Vera approached him carrying one of the infants, now stronger, their blue eyes wide with curiosity. "He doesn't cry when you hold him," she said. Joshua took the child carefully. "Maybe he recognizes the design flaw," he said. "You," she said, "talk like you built the stars." "No," he replied, smiling, "just the mistakes. But peace has a way of attracting old ghosts." One night, a warning beacon blinked to life on the horizon, a transmission from orbit. Joshua's blood went cold. He hadn't seen that signal since the fall of the colonies. It's an Earth code, he said. Koresh stiffened beside him. Your people. If they're still calling themselves that, he said grimly. The message repeated, faint but clear, reconnaissance vessel approaching Ephora 9. Prepare for reclamation. Reclamation. Vera said. That means conquest. Or cleanup, Joshua said. If they think this place is infected, they'll sterilize it. Koresh's jaw tightened. You mean they'll kill us? They'll call it mercy, he said. Silence fell around the fire. The air seemed heavier, charged with the weight of choice. Then we show them what mercy looks like, Koresh said finally. We make them see what you've made here. They had 3 days before the Earth vessel entered the atmosphere. Joshua spent every hour upgrading the signal tower, broadcasting planetary readings, oxygen levels, vegetation growth, proof of renewal. If they see life, they won't destroy it, he said. They'll see hybrids, Koresh countered. They'll see monsters. Then they'll have to talk to me first. You think they'll listen to one man? I think, he said, glancing at the children, they'll listen to a father. The next sunrise came painted in blood-red light as the ship broke through the clouds, a silver dagger cutting across the sky. Dust storms whipped around the landing site. The tribe gathered on the ridge to watch as the vessel settled with a hiss, its insignia still bearing the emblem of the United Earth Fleet. The airlock opened. A squad of armored soldiers stepped out, rifles gleaming. At their center stood a woman in command armor, visor reflective, posture immaculate. Identify yourself, her amplified voice called. Joshua stepped forward, his heart pounding. Name's Joshua Kane, he said. Engineer, Ephora Project. You're late. The woman lowered her visor. You're supposed to be dead. Been hearing that a lot, he said. This world's alive again. You can stand down. Alive, she repeated. Your readings show contamination. That contamination, he said, pointing to Koresh and her people, is the reason the planet's breathing. The soldiers shifted uneasily as the Huntresses emerged from the dust, tall and radiant, their eyes glowing in the stormlight. The commander raised her weapon instinctively. Hybrids, she said. Abominations of protocol. Call them whatever you want, Joshua said. They're your descendants too. Our mission is containment, she said coldly. We're authorized to neutralize any unstable genetic strain. Then you'll have to kill me first, he said. The silence that followed was electric. Koresh moved beside him, spear lowered but steady. You'd die for us, she whispered. I already lived because of you, he said. The commander hesitated. You can't protect them, Kane. This isn't about morality, it's about preservation. Funny, he said. That's exactly what we're doing. The soldiers aimed their rifles. The tribe tensed. The infants began to cry. The sound, small, fragile, human, cut through the wind like a plea older than any order. For a long, trembling moment, no one moved. Then the commander lowered her weapon. Cease fire, she said quietly. Her soldiers obeyed. You have one chance to prove this world isn't lost, she said. Show me what you've built. Koresh looked at Joshua, and for the first time, he saw uncertainty in her eyes. Then let's show them, he said. Let's show them what hope looks like. They led the soldiers through the settlement, through the greenhouses breathing recycled air, through the new reservoirs catching condensation, through the laughter of children chasing light. The humans watched in silence, their expressions shifting from suspicion to awe. This shouldn't be possible, one muttered. It wasn't, Joshua said, until we stopped pretending it had to be human to matter. The commander paused beside a solar field where hybrid workers repaired panels with careful precision. You did this without fleet support. No fleet, no command, no miracles, he said. Just cooperation. She turned toward Koresh. And you? You follow him? No, Koresh said. We walk beside him. The commander's visor reflected the two of them, human and hybrid, builder and huntress, defying extinction. Maybe the contamination, she said softly, was the cure. That night, the Earth vessel transmitted new data to its fleet, Ephra 9 declared stable. No sterilization required. The relief that swept through the settlement felt like wind after drought. The tribe celebrated with fire and song, their voices rising into the night. Joshua stood at the edge of the camp, watching the ship's lights disappear into the stars. Koresh joined him, her tone gentle. Will they return? Eventually, he said. Curiosity always does. And you, she asked. Will you leave when they do? He looked at the horizon, at the faint glow of dawn blooming over reborn land. Not yet, he said. There's still work to do. She smiled faintly. Always the maker. Always the student, he said. You taught me that. Then maybe, she said, we've both learned what it means to be alive. The next months passed like chapters from a book Joshua never thought he'd get to read. The wasteland he once called home was gone, replaced by valleys painted in bronze light and green shoots. Rain returned, soft, thin, the kind that didn't yet trust the sky but still fell anyway. The tribe grew with it, more survivors arriving every week from the shattered poles, drawn by the stories of the Maker Father and the Huntresses who walked beside him. Joshua spent his mornings recalibrating old machines and his nights staring at the stars with Koresh, wondering if the universe finally forgave them. When laughter echoed across the campfires, he realized the sound was no longer foreign. It belonged to this world now, woven into its new rhythm, fragile yet indestructible. For the first time since Earth, he stopped counting days. One dawn, Koresh approached him with urgency in her step. Scouts returned, she said. They found something in the southern basin, metal, deep buried. Joshua followed her to the ridge overlooking the plain. A shape glinted beneath the dunes, a dome half exposed by shifting winds. It's one of the deep-seed vaults, he said, his heart quickening. They were built to store biosphere data. Can you wake it? She asked. If it's intact. He looked at her and grinned. Guess we're going digging. By midday, the tribe surrounded the site, digging through sand and rust with handmade tools. As the entrance finally emerged, sealed steel carved with human insignia, Joshua brushed his fingers across the faded letters, Ephra Genesis Repository. He exhaled slowly. This was supposed to restart the planet, he whispered. Looks like it waited for us. Inside, the air was stale but breathable. Rows of sealed pods lined the walls, glowing faintly. He connected his scanner to the main terminal, its display flickering alive after centuries of sleep. Storage integrity at 41%, he muttered. Half the data's gone, but maybe we can salvage enough. Koresh stood beside him, her golden eyes scanning the holograms dancing in the dark. What is it? She asked. Blueprints, he said. For ecosystems, for species, even cities. It's everything humanity hoped to rebuild. She tilted her head. Then it's your history. No, he said quietly. It's our second chance. Together they worked for hours, reviving one archive after another. Every light that flickered on felt like breathing life into memory. When the first holographic forest shimmered before them, Koresh stepped closer, her expression caught between awe and sorrow. So this is what your world looked like. Ours, he said softly. If we make it so. When they emerged, the tribe was waiting, their faces lit by the faint glow from the dome. Joshua raised his voice. We can bring back the oceans. The seeds are here, everything we need to rebuild the world properly. Murmurs spread through the crowd, disbelief turning to hope. Then we plant, Koresh said simply. And so they did. Over the next weeks, under his guidance, irrigation lines spread through the valleys. Drone harvesters rebuilt from old fleet wreckage sowed the first generation of hybrid flora, plants that breathed both oxygen and trace nitrogen, resilient enough to thrive where the old biosphere had failed. Children ran barefoot through soil that no longer burned. At night, they sang old Earth songs translated into alien cadence, voices mingling under twin moons. Joshua often watched from a distance, afraid to believe it would last. But every morning, the world looked a little greener, and he allowed himself to hope. The message from orbit shattered that peace. A fleet, not Earth's this time, but something else, appeared on long-range sensors. The signal codes were unknown, their transmissions encrypted in frequencies even his devices couldn't decode. They're not human, Joshua said grimly. Or Thalren, Koresh added. Something new. The atmosphere rippled as the first of the ships descended, sleek black vessels that moved like shadows. Panic spread through the settlement. "Evacuate the young," Koresh ordered. Joshua stared at the sky, every instinct screaming that he'd seen this before. "Not again," he whispered. The largest ship hovered above the plains, releasing drones that began scanning the terrain. "They are surveying," he said. "Maybe not hostile." A beam of light struck the ground near them, cutting a perfect circle into the sand. "Correction," he muttered. "Definitely hostile." The drones attacked with precision, their weapons emitting pulses that disrupted the very air. Koresh and her warriors fought with the fluid brutality of predators, energy spears cutting through the mechanical swarm. Joshua sprinted to the power cores, rerouting grid lines to overload the atmosphere relays. "Buy me 2 minutes," he shouted. Sparks rained from the sky as drones fell, but for each one destroyed, 2 more appeared. He bypassed the safety locks, sweat streaming down his neck. The screen flashed, manual override confirmed. "Everyone down," he yelled. A surge of energy rippled through the valley, turning every tower and conduit into a massive EMP pulse. The drones froze mid-flight before crashing like shattered glass into the sand. The sky went silent. When the smoke cleared, only one ship remained hovering, motionless, watching. Koresh stood beside him, blood streaking her armor, her breathing steady. "They'll return," she said. "Not if we talk first," he replied. "Talk," she repeated incredulously. "With what?" "A signal," he said. "You fought with strength, now let me fight with words." He walked to the communication tower, patched into the emergency frequency, and transmitted an open channel. "This is Joshua Kane of Ephra 9, he said, his voice echoing into static. "If you came looking for a dead world, you're too late. It's alive, and it's ours now." For a long moment, only silence answered. Then a voice, deep, metallic, replied, "Origin unknown. Presence unauthorized. Clarify claim." "Claim," he said, almost laughing. "We're not claiming anything. We're just living." Another pause, then, assessment in progress. The ship turned slowly and ascended, vanishing into the upper atmosphere like a phantom. 4 days, tension hung like dust in the air. Scouts reported no further contact, and the settlement returned to rebuilding, but unease lingered. Joshua found himself standing on the ridge each night, staring at the stars. "You think they'll come back?" Koresh asked one evening. "Everything does," he said. "Even extinction." She stepped closer, her gaze tracing the horizon. "You fear what you've built will be taken again." "I fear it's too fragile," he said. "That we are." "Then stop fearing," she said. "If it dies, we build again. That's what you taught us." He turned toward her, smiling faintly. "And here I thought I was the teacher." "You are," she said softly. "But even teachers need to believe their lessons." The wind brushed between them, carrying the scent of growing things. She reached out and took his hand, no ceremony, no hesitation. For a heartbeat, the ruins around them felt holy. The following dawn brought change. The soil sensors reported stability. Oxygen levels reached breathable equilibrium for the first time since the collapse. The dome reactors, once symbols of failure, now powered an entire ecosystem. The dead planet was no longer dead. As the tribe gathered to watch the sun rise, Koresh turned to him and said, "It's done." He looked at the horizon glowing gold over blue fields. "No," he said. "It's beginning." Children's laughter echoed through the air, mingling with the sound of alien birds that had returned to the sky. He smiled, thinking of the moment he'd first opened his door to 3 huntresses under a red sky. The man who lived alone among ghosts was gone. In his place stood a builder, a father, and a witness to rebirth. The storm had ended, and the silence that followed wasn't emptiness anymore, it was peace, breathing for the first time. The years that followed turned the once desolate world of Ephra 9 into something the galaxy had stopped believing in, a miracle that grew out of ruin. From orbit, the planet no longer glowed red but emerald and gold, clouds curling across seas that reflected twin suns. Joshua sometimes watched the sky from the rebuilt citadel at the heart of the valley, unable to reconcile that this was the same world he'd once called a tomb. The people who lived here, humans, hybrids, and descendants of the Huntresses, had forged a new name for themselves, the Etheric Union. They sang in 2 languages now, one born of earth, the other shaped by alien wind. Machines no longer ruled them, they guided them. Nature no longer fought them, it listened. And through it all, the story of the Maker Father became the thread that held every generation's hope together. Joshua, though, never cared much for the titles. He spent most of his days in the workshops teaching children how to build water collectors from scrap, or explaining why even broken machines deserved patience. He laughed easily now, something Karesh teased him for endlessly. She still led, though her armor had been traded for ceremonial cloth woven from the silver vines that covered the valley walls. Sometimes, when she walked among the people, Joshua would see them bow their heads in reverence, and she would glare until they stopped. "I don't command gods," she'd say. "I raise stubborn gardeners." At night they still shared the same quiet fire, a habit that outlived empires. There, they spoke not of legends or miracles but of ordinary things, what crops had grown, what machines had failed, what new mischief the children had invented. The twins, Vera and Sol, had become matriarchs of their own clans. The 2 infants Joshua once held had grown into young adults, their skin marked with subtle traces of both lineages. They called him father without hesitation, though he often corrected them, "Just Joshua will do." Still, he couldn't hide his pride when he saw them teaching others how to read the old schematics he had saved. They were engineers now, dreamers who built bridges across the canyons and carried stories across the stars through encoded light. One evening, as the valley prepared for the decade's harvest ceremony, Karesh found him sitting on the balcony, staring at the horizon painted in violet haze. "You've gone quiet," she said. "That's new." He smiled. "Just thinking how strange it is to miss silence after spending so long inside it." "You never miss it," she said softly. "You remember it, so you can recognize the difference." Later that night, the ceremony began. Lanterns floated into the air like sparks set free, each carrying a message from someone who had survived the old world. The people danced, their laughter rising above the sound of wind chimes made from reactor glass. Joshua stood among them, feeling the vibration of life under his boots. Karesh approached him wearing a circlet of polished bone and metal, the symbol of renewal. "Say something," she urged. "They want to hear you." He hesitated, looking out over the crowd, thousands of faces illuminated by firelight, human and alien, children running between them like starlings. "I'm not a leader," he said. "Then speak as a builder," she replied. So he did. "Once," he began, "this world was a grave. I stayed here because I thought dying alone was easier than failing again. But you, all of you, proved that failure was never death. It was a seed. You taught the soil to breathe, the air to forgive, and me to remember what it means to belong." The silence that followed was vast, not empty but full of heartbeat. Then someone began to clap, and the sound multiplied until it became a storm of hands and voices. Karesh touched his shoulder. "They'll remember that," she said. "You shouldn't encourage them," he muttered, but his smile betrayed him. The music resumed, louder now, the valley alive with rhythm. For the first time since humanity's fall, Epher-9 felt like home, not to one species, but to something larger, something shared. Yet even in celebration, Joshua couldn't ignore the faint unease gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. He'd lived long enough to know peace was never permanent, it was a promise that needed constant repair. So when he noticed the shimmer in the sky days later, a ripple of light that didn't belong to clouds or sun, his heart sank before he could name it. At first the people thought it was a comet, beautiful and harmless. But Joshua recognized the pattern of descent, controlled, deliberate. Another ship. "Not Earth," Karesh said after scanning the signals. "Not the shadows from before." "Then who?" he asked. "Something new." They stood on the citadel's roof as the vessel entered the atmosphere. It was unlike any he had seen, fluid, crystalline, alive with shifting color. It landed silently beyond the river. From it emerged figures of translucent flesh, moving with a grace that defied gravity. Their voices were harmonic, their language a song more than speech. The crowd gathered at a distance, or replacing fear. One of the beings approached Joshua and Karesh, its eyes glowing like liquid gold. "You are the resurrected," it said through the translator. "We watched the silence and came when it broke. Your laughter reached the stars. Joshua blinked, unsure whether to laugh or bow. You heard us. The universe remembers joy, the being said. It carries farther than war. Koresh's expression softened. Then you are friends. We are witnesses, it replied. We seek the origin of your harmony. Origin. Joshua repeated. A word, a sound, the being said. It began here. It touched the soil gently. We came to learn. And so began a new kind of exchange, not of conquest or trade but of understanding. The crystalline visitors studied the resonance networks that pulsed beneath Ephra's crust, the same frequencies born from laughter centuries ago. Joshua helped them map the waveform, discovering it had spread across the planet like veins of light. It's part of the biosphere now, he told Koresh. We literally rebuilt the world's heartbeat with sound. She smiled. Then it's the one thing they can't steal. Time blurred again. The visitors stayed for a season, then departed, leaving behind archives of their knowledge, mathematics written in color, songs that described galaxies, stories without words. When their ships vanished, Ephra's skies shimmered brighter than before. The people held festivals of music to honor the gift, filling the night with voices that could almost touch the stars. Yet even in joy, Joshua felt the edges of age creeping in. His hands, once steady with a wrench, trembled. His breath shortened climbing the workshop stairs. Koresh noticed before he said anything. You're fading, she said one night. Just slowing down, he answered. Humans were never built to last this long. You could rest. Not while there's something left to teach. She reached across the table and took his hand. Then teach me what comes after. After, he echoed. After the builders are gone. He smiled gently. Then you build again. His last days came quietly, wrapped in sunlight and laughter. He spent them recording everything, how to keep the reactors humming, how to listen when the soil spoke, how to tell a story so it could survive translation. When he could no longer walk, the people carried him to the ridge where the vault first awoke. Koresh sat beside him, the horizon glowing gold. You changed the fate of worlds, she said softly. No, he whispered, we just remembered how to live. She leaned closer. What do you see? He smiled weakly. A world that doesn't need me anymore. It always will, she said. Then make sure it proves me wrong. His breathing slowed. The last thing he heard was the wind carrying the laughter of children through the valley. Then the world grew still, not with death but with memory. They buried him beneath the first tree that grew on Ephra 9, a tree whose roots glowed faintly with the same blue light that once powered his machines. Koresh stood before the gathered crowd, her voice steady. He was the last man of the old world, she said. But he taught us that beginnings are louder than endings. She placed his wrench, polished silver now, at the base of the trunk. He built so we could laugh. The people bowed their heads, not in mourning but gratitude. As night fell, the valley pulsed with soft radiance, the hum of resonance traveling through soil, air, and heart alike. In that vibration, something eternal stirred, a whisper that crossed stars and time alike. When the wind shifted, it carried a sound that no storm could silence, the laughter of a man who lived long enough to hear the universe laugh back.